Welcome, everyone, and thank you for joining today. Our topic is diversity and inclusion. So before I start, I'd like to introduce myself. I'm Nicole with Pryor Learning Solutions. I am a continuous learner, and I feel engaged and empowered learning from my network, as well as sharing my experience gained through over 20 years in sales, marketing, and operations management. The journey of development events is a way for me to continue my own personal development and support others with their growth and development. Through Pryor, I work as a consultant to organizations to improve communication, collaboration, and culture across all levels of the organization through customized programs designed specifically to meet their learning and strategic goals. When it comes to diversity and inclusion, we offer a broad range of learning opportunities, including topics such as the value of diversity, global cultural awareness, exploring diverse cultures, gateways to inclusion, overcoming personal barriers to diversity, and much more. Let me know if you'd like to review our learning events or e-learning content further after our event today. As part of the program, since we have so many people from the industry on one meeting, wanted to share a highlight of a talented professional who's seeking her next career challenge. We have Audrey Hackley. She is looking for a position, either a senior manager, director, or senior director role in learning and leadership development or organizational effectiveness. She's looking around the Chicagoland area or remote positions in a variety of industries. She's very passionate about partnering with business leaders to provide guidance and support to best leverage the organization and achieve business results. If you know of opportunities that would be a good fit for Audrey, or like you think she should be talking to someone specific that could lead her in the right direction, please reach out and let her know. With that, I'm going to let Wendy kick off and announce our first panelists.
Hi, good afternoon, everyone. Anthony Perrone is the head of talent management, executive, and leadership development and diversity for Sutherland Global. He directs the organization's worldwide HR talent and learning function in support of Sutherland's business strategy. Anthony joined Sutherland in July 2016, bringing with him 13 years of both generalist and talent specialist experience, working with client groups in corporate, domestic, and international functions and business units. In his capacity as an HR executive, he has more than 15 years serving across diverse lines of business and industries, establishing people culture, talent strategy, organization design, human capital management processes, leadership development, and high potential initiatives that have impact across global organizations. Known for leading with conviction and optimism with a proven track record of establishing trust, breaking down complex problems, and executing practical solutions. Earlier in his career, Anthony spent several years focused on P&L and operations management with Simplex Time Recorder Company. He holds a bachelor's degree in construction management from Utica College of Syracuse University and a master's degree in organization management from Antioch, New England Graduate School. So let's welcome Anthony Perrone to the panel.
Well, thank you so much. I appreciate the introduction. It's as if I wrote it myself. So thank you very much. I think at this point, Nicole, I'm going to share a few thoughts. So yeah, I mean, what's happening with this conversation that's supposed to be about people? It's supposed to be about something good. And in many ways, I think it's become a noisy, sticky conversation to have, and especially against the backdrop of what's happening across many U.S. cities, the backdrop of what's happening in the UK with Brexit, and what's happening in Germany, frankly, with refugees. And so this is not exactly the most fun conversation to have, but I think it's an important conversation, and I'm highly appreciative of Nicole and her organization for bringing it to the forefront today. From an HR perspective, you know, the truth is that it's not a lack of trying. In fact, since my time in HR, what I see most companies do is provide a healthy amount of funding. And they hire a chief diversity officer in many respects. They invest in tons and tons of initiatives, and they focus on recruiting because, you know, the media says we have to have a higher percentage the next year of representative demographics than we had in the previous year. They invest in trainings, unconscious bias, training after training takes place. And unfortunately, in the worst case, many individuals who don't consider themselves to be or two who don't consider themselves to be underrepresented are really scared to talk about this. And so as a result, nobody's really having the right conversations, in my opinion. So what I'm going to ask us to do for the next few minutes is to try to humanize this topic. It's not about the metrics. I don't want to talk about the percentages. I mean, yes, ultimately, those are some of the ways that we measure it. But what I'm going to ask us to do is throw out the trainings, throw out the money for a second, and especially for those of you who are just getting started, because you have, frankly, the best opportunity to make an impactful change. So Nicole, can you please put up the slide? So I want you to think about this picture just for a second. How would you imagine this boy feels in this picture? How would you imagine he might describe how he feels to his mom and dad or his grandparents about this day in his life? Now, how about you? I want to dial it back in your own life to a personal event where you felt excluded. Now, this doesn't have to be about race or gender or age or sexual orientation. This can be about when you were 4 years old, you being picked for the kickball team. This could be earlier today when you realized that people at your company held a meeting and didn't invite you. It doesn't matter what it is. I just want you to come up with a couple of adjectives to describe how it made you feel. The way you feel, the way this young boy feels, are those experiences about being human beings regardless of our backgrounds. The point of this is there are people who are working for you and people who want to work for you who are feeling this way right now inside your organization. I guarantee that everyone on this call has been excluded in their lifetime. The question I think we must all ask ourselves then is how many of us have ever been responsible, intentionally or unintentionally, for excluding someone else? The truth is we've all done it before. So again, what I'm asking you to do is not a training. I'm not asking you to throw money at it. I'm asking you to start with diversity inclusion by simply committing in your positions of influence to never either directly or allow anyone in your sphere of influence to feel the way that this little boy felt or that you thought about earlier a moment ago. I want to share a metaphor and analogy with you. This is not mine, but I've heard this and I really liked it. Diversity can be likened to being invited to the dance party. So you open the invitation, you're all excited, however that gets to you. Saturday of the party rolls around, we've got our best clothes on, and man, we're ready to go. And we're all at the party, we're standing in a room, and there is tons of diversity at this party and in this room, however you might describe it. But so what? If only the athletes are the ones doing the dancing, or if it's only people of a certain age or people who speak a certain language who are dancing. Folks, my point is diversity alone is not enough, and I know you all know that. If diversity is being invited to the dance party, then inclusion is being asked to dance when you're at the party, and I really like that. As leaders, the question is, great if you're trying to recruit people from diverse backgrounds, but are you asking people to dance inside your companies? At Sutherland, where I've been for the past year, we really think about diversity and inclusion through three major frames or lenses. First, of course, is the workforce. We have to focus on statistics like we all do in terms of recruiting. We've heard tons of times the diverse workforce helps with profits in business because many of our customers and end users reflect a broad array of diversity. It's an important table stakes action. The second, though, which is perhaps the hardest, is the actual workplace itself. How do you actually feel? How do your employees actually feel when they're being invited to dance? Or are they being, when they're being invited to the dance, or are they being invited to dance when you're actually in the workplace? And then the third is marketplace. There's lots of research and studies, I'm sure you've all seen them out there, about a more diverse workforce, get you more customers, but continue to push on this by asking yourself, what communities are you missing out on? This is our real question that we are asking and having a conversation about with our leaders every day. What communities are we missing out on? Which individuals are we not bringing into our platform because we're not thinking about it in a diverse and inclusive ways? A couple of things I would suggest you try with your people. First, start with a conversation. We can bring in external experts to talk about unconscious bias. We can hire a chief diversity officer. But have we actually had a conversation, understand what diversity and inclusion mean to the people who we work with? Do you know? Maybe it's about physical appearance. Maybe it's about languages. It's also probably about race and gender and sexual orientation. The point is, don't miss out on bringing people into the conversation because of a narrow definition of diversity and inclusion. And at Sutherland, yes, we do talk about diversity, inclusion, and certain things in the US. But what does diversity inclusion mean here compared to what it means in India, for example, or what it means in China? By having the conversation and hearing people and listening, I think you'll get the information you need to get where to meet people on this important conversation. Second, make inclusion inclusive. Many of us have gotten to a place where we have initiatives that are focused on certain populations with employee resource groups, women, veterans, Blacks, Hispanics in the US. But what good are those initiatives if people in the majority don't feel welcome in that conversation? If it's simply an initiative focused on women, which by the way is fantastic, we have it ourselves, but men look at it or homosexuals look at it and they say, oh, heck no, I'm not going in that room, how are we ever going to move the needle on this conversation? And so I would push you to continue to broaden the definition and have those important conversations so that we have hyper focus on underrepresented communities and that you're partnering with majority communities, again, however your organization defines that. If you're in a place in your organization where you don't know if you should call Tony Black or African American, get to a place by having a conversation where it's okay to ask that question. If you don't know if you should call someone homosexual or gay, get to a place where you can ask that question. The worst thing that can happen is that we say nothing at all. Third, I want you to find the business case. For every single person listening to my voice, it exists. You can drive revenue through diversity and inclusion. And my best advice is forget about the research. Forget about the studies. Find the real opportunity in your business model that makes the biggest difference. And finally, I've been coaching leaders like probably many of you for the better part of a decade. And I will tell you, and I think you can appreciate, the biggest Achilles heels that I see with senior leaders who make lots of money and have big titles is in the inability to make themselves vulnerable. And I can tell you, rest assured, that unless we build the trust, we build the credibility with those senior leaders to help show them how making themselves vulnerable will actually move the needle in this discussion. Thank you for your time, and I'll turn it back over to Nicole.
Thank you. I'm going to turn it to Wendy.
Thanks, Nicole. Next panelist we have is Ojunga Carr. He is the CEO of Epiphany Consulting, LLC, as well as a certified high-performance coach, author, international seminar leader, organizational structure expert, and consultant. He brings almost 20 years of experience in sales, management, and human resources. His passion is the dynamic of change, how to prepare for it, how to work through it, and how to succeed. He focuses on productivity through structure and human capital development. Ojunga has trained tens of thousands of HR professionals in 49 states. I'm going to be really curious which state he's missed. He consults, trains, and develops HR and compliance programs within organizations. With Epiphany, Ojunga helps organizations and individuals do more of what they want to do instead of what they have to do. So we welcome Ojinga Carr.
Wendy, the state that I have missed is North Dakota.
Oh, look at you. Okay, I was going to mention one of the upper ones, but I like it.
Absolutely. I've gotten Hawaii and Alaska. Yeah, the state I've missed is North Dakota. Thank you guys so much. First of all, hopes and wishes for safety for people who are in the headed for with Irma headed that direction after Harvey. I know that was terrible, and everything along those lines. I am a certified high performance coach, and I do train as an independent contractor with Pryor as well too. So I travel across the country teaching HR. And what I want to talk about really quickly here today is really just diversity and inclusion through structure. How it is that we can increase our productivity within our organizations. I really appreciate what was just said as far as including and inclusion in those things. And one of the things for me, if I can get my computer to work here, there we go. One of the things that I look at, that one of the biggest things for me is that teamwork makes the dream work. I played football in college. I played sports all the way through high school, and then played football in college. And so I am always interested in the dynamics of teams. And so the most diverse and most inclusive group that I ever was in was on a football team. And when you're on a good team, understand the fact that the greatest thing that I loved about football was that you had 11 people all pointing one direction, and they all had the same goal. And so it did not matter about background. It did not matter about orientation or any of those different things. That's your teammate. That's your brother. That's the person who you're there with. And so it's really important. And so I'm going to give you a sports analogy today. But even if you don't follow sports, I think it'll be pretty easy to be able to follow in what we're doing. Because when I got into the workforce, first as an employee and then as a manager, what I really noticed is that dealing with teams was a lot like dealing with grown 2-year-olds, pretty much. I just really wanted an excuse to put my 2-year-old on the video, honestly. But the thing is that it really is like that as far as in our teams, and not being able to figure out how we can really be inclusive and how we can have the structure that we need in order to be successful in our businesses. Understand the fact that for diversity and inclusion to be a part of what you're doing in your business, it actually just has to be a part of what it is you're actually putting together. It has to be a structure of your organization and what you're doing in your company. So it has to be really intentional in what it is that we're putting together, and that has to be really intentional. And so I want you to understand there was a recent study that talked about the 5 things that motivate your employees the most. And those 5 things are benefits, paycheck, who they work for, who they work with, and what they do. Benefits, paycheck, who they work for, who they work with, and what they do. But those are not in the order of importance for your employees. Now, when I ask this question across the country, more than likely, most people say that your paycheck is the most important thing to your employees. But actually, studies show the most important thing to your employees is who they work with, then who they work for, then what they do, then finally paycheck and benefits. And so in order to be able to create cohesive teams, it is all about figuring out how it is that we can be inclusive of the people who we work with. And one of the biggest ways for that is to be more job-centric in our processes and what we do. Many times we find ourselves being people-centric in our hiring processes. But in our hiring processes, if we could find people who could actually do the work, that's one of the biggest things. Actually hiring people who can actually do the work, then tying in the inclusiveness and the diversity, then that will be really important. Because what we find is that we hire people who we are comfortable with. And many times we're comfortable with people who are just like us. And so you have a business that is owned by a woman, and she may be more likely to hire women. You have a business that's owned by an African American, and they may be more likely to hire African Americans. Same thing around. And so we have to be, first of all, structure based and understand the fact that it's getting the job done, and figuring out how it is that we can meld these different personalities, these different types, these different ethnicities, these different things together into a team, and figure out how to do that. And so because I'm an athlete, I look at things from an athletic background. And so I want to give you 4 steps to creating successful teams. All right. So the first thing we have to have is we have to have mutual purpose. Then we have to have empowered people. Then we have to have proper change communication. And then we have to have visionary thinking. So mutual purpose, empowered people, proper change communication, and visionary thinking. You can equal successful teams. I can show you any team, whether you're talking about an organizational team or whether we are talking about an athletic team. And if they are not succeeding, they are usually failing in one of these 4 areas, one or more of these 4 areas as far as with it. So the first thing that we have to have is that we have to have mutual purpose for our teams, mutual purpose. So on a football team, when you get in a huddle, the quarterback calls the play, and everybody knows what the play is. Everybody knows what the play is, what it is they're supposed to get done. Everybody knows it, and it's been communicated correctly to them. So in our teams, are we communicating the mutual purpose of what it is that we're doing, and do we recognize and value what it is that each person has to do within that? If we're concentrating on a goal and on purpose, then we will find ourselves in teams that meld together better, because everybody's going to concentrate on the purpose. And so we don't have time to concentrate on our differences and what those things that are different, that we don't like about this other person, that we're concerned about this other person. What we are now bonded together to do is to figure out how it is to be able to get something done within our organization. So we have a purpose that we are on together. I consider many of the issues that we deal with today, when we think about diversity and not being diverse or being concerned about someone else, it's really white noise is what it really is, because it's just a distraction from whatever our actual purpose is. And so if we can be clear about what our purpose is and have that mutual purpose, and our teams get together and we move forward together in that way, then we have an excellent way of being able to get that done and move that forward. But then the second piece of that we discussed was empowered people. So in football, I always knew that the guy to the left and the right of me knew what they were doing. And I could always know that those people to the left and the right of me knew exactly what they were doing. And so they were empowered in order to be able to do it. So are you empowering your people around you to even be able to make mistakes? To be able to go out and make decisions and do those things together? Because when people feel empowered, they feel more together and they feel more directed in what it is they're doing. And so diversity and inclusion to me is all about how is it that we can include people in, and people feel more included when they have responsibilities. And so when you have someone that's kind of going to work and they are just doing busy work or whatever, then they aren't really focused on where it is and what it is to be able to get done and how to be able to knock that out. And so when we empower our people, then now we've given ourselves a better chance of being able to get things done. So we have empowered people that were there. So first of all, we have to have mutual purpose. Everybody's understanding the purpose of what it is we're doing. Then the next thing we have to look at is how it is that our people can be empowered. But the third piece is the piece that usually causes us the biggest issue within it, and that is proper change communication. Proper change communication. So proper change communication cost me my football career. I was in a game. We were in a loud stadium, and I was playing at a left guard position, and there was a left tackle that was outside of me. The play was initially called away from us. We were running away from us, away from to the right side. The quarterback saw something and made an audible call and changed the play. So now the play would be running directly behind us and directly behind us in what we were doing. Well, it was a loud stadium, and so the left tackle, who was my teammate, who was outside of me, did not hear the play change. And so now I stepped forward to block the guy who was in front of me. He's still doing what we were doing before, which is blocking down, and he ended up diving into my knee and tore every ligament in my knee and ended my football career. Proper change communication is that important in your organizations as well, too. It is that important to be able to look at and see, are we communicating change? Because if we're not communicating change, then people now are confused about what it is that they're supposed to be doing, and now we get off of task, and now we have more issues as it relates to our diversity, because now those personality types start to bug against each other and butt heads, and now we have these issues, and now we have problems as it relates to our change communication and the different things with that. And so we have proper change communication, then we can definitely put those things into place and be able to get those things done. But finally, the fourth piece of this is visionary leadership and visionary thinking. So we have to be able to look at and say, what is it as far as that visionary thinking and that visionary leadership? What do we want our organization to look like? Are we putting programs into place, but not only just putting programs into place, are we actually working with our people to look at, in football, the quarterback gets all the credit. After a game, they said he did a great job. But when the first thing the quarterback does is thank their offensive linemen, thank their running backs, thank their wide receivers, those people as far as that, because they're looking at it and they're saying that without all these other working pieces working correctly, we wouldn't be able to do it. So do you have a plan for making sure that you're inclusive? Do you have a plan for making sure that we recognize the diversity of our workforce? Do we have plans for making people feel comfortable and also doing it? If you have a workforce where a great portion of your workforce speaks a different language, are you giving classes in that language for your other employees? So maybe they might be able to understand better, and we might be able to do that and to be able to pull together. These are different things that we can think of and different things that we can do to be visionary in our organizations and to be able to be more diverse and more inclusive in what it is that we are doing. And so it's really important in our businesses, in our country. We're doing nothing but getting more diverse. And so we have to be able to make sure that we show how to be able to do that. And so I appreciate you guys for allowing me the opportunity to be able to just share that and talk about those things and talk about my thoughts and those feelings with that today.
And our last panelist is John Pratts. As Chief of Human Resources, he oversees the Personnel Management Bureau for the Miami-Dade Corrections and Rehabilitation Department, the 8th largest jail system in the United States with a workforce of over 3,000. A versatile HR professional with hands-on experience in diverse HR disciplines, he has performed work as a lecturer, teaching the SHRM learning system, and has more than 20 years of experience delivering employee development training to include valuing cultural diversity. He earned a master's degree in business administration and human resources management. He is a SHRM, SCP, and SPHR since 2006. So we'd like to welcome to the panel John Pratts.
Hello, everyone. Can you hear me well?
We can hear you. Are you faring down in Miami?
Yes, we're down in Miami, and as you can imagine, I do work for the jail system, and we are really getting ready for this storm. As you know, the governor has declared a state of emergency. So it's been just hands-on getting ready. We have a lot. We have more than 4,000 inmates in our facilities right now, and it's just a huge responsibility. So my thinking has been more on the hurricane than anything else at the moment. But it is a pleasure to have heard such amazing panelists speak on diversity. I've learned a lot just listening to each of you. What I would like to do is just, as I look back over the years, one of the things in many organizations, including our own, we have Miami-Dade County, we have 30,000 employees. And while diversity, cultural diversity is important, over time, sometimes when there are budget crunches in organizations, training seems to be the first thing to go. as many of you would probably agree. And the reality is, training is very important. Over the years, I had the opportunity to be in classroom settings where I would teach a class or facilitate a cultural diversity class where there would be at a minimum 30 supervisors in a room. And what I learned was that I was learning more from just listening to the people in the room than I was even prepared to share with them. And I believe that, unfortunately, today we're doing a lot of e-learning, and not to say that there's anything wrong with e-learning, but there's so much more. When you're talking about cultural diversity, there is a great value in having people in a room together to experience the different stories that different people have to tell. So I'm a very strong believer in training in an organization. When we talk about diversity and inclusion, I think the first step is really valuing diversity, understanding how diversity and what diversity is. Sometimes, like I heard some of the panelists say, diversity is much more than just race and ethnicity. I have heard stories of people that have been raised in the same household. You have the first child, there's the middle child syndrome that we've heard of, right? So, and then oftentimes brothers and sisters can ask each other, how is it possible that we grew up in the same household, yet we are so different in the way that we see the world around us? And that is because even if you're in the same room, ask any police investigator when they're taking statements, even though you had people standing in the same room, you will receive different accounts because people experience the world around us differently. So when I think of diversity, I look at the micro and I look at the macro. There's just, I value diversity because in a team, regardless, I mean, we talk about socio-economics, even there, a quick story that I remember, I was playing racquetball one day, and all of a sudden the lights went out. Now, I was ready to go home. There was an individual playing with us who had just, he had been in this country for a short period of time. He came over from Cuba, where the social economics are totally different. Well, while we were all ready to leave the room, he said, wait a minute. And this guy had skills. He was just able to make the lights work again, just by opening up the electrical box. So I say that to say that because of our different experiences that we bring to the table, when we do have true diversity in an organization, the decision making will just be, so much better. So I believe first we need to value diversity and understand that diversity is much, much broader than just, ethnicity, et cetera, et cetera. So, okay, so once we get beyond getting people to value diversity, one of the things that I remember that I really used to love as a trainer is when people have what we call an aha moment, where they simply open their mouth in disbelief because they're looking at a new truth that they never saw before. And we get people to that point in training, and this is something you cannot experience with e-training, where you can only experience it when you have an experienced facilitator in a room that can bring people together to that moment where they realize, wow, I missed something. And you do it through many exercises. When you can get people to realize that the world or what they are looking at is not always what it appears, then we can start moving closer to getting them to understand that perhaps many of the stereotypes and beliefs that they've had about other people, maybe there's much more to people. Even when it comes to, I remember one lady, and she had a very loud aha moment in a classroom. We were talking about personal space. Well, when you talk about diversity, people from different parts of the world and different cultures, they also have different experiences when it comes to personal space. And one lady in a classroom talked about, she thought it was an issue of sexual harassment, and she never considered culture as far as the difference in personal space that maybe had made her feel uncomfortable. So it is important for us to sometimes look back and say, maybe there's something more here that I'm not seeing. Once we can get people to that understanding of valuing diversity and giving them an opportunity to let people tell their stories instead of seeing someone and because of their sex, race, or ethnicity, where I'm just going to use my stereotypes and say, well, this person is Hispanic, so therefore they must be like this, and like that. Well, when we do that, we're going to reach very erroneous conclusions. So once we get beyond that, the next step is inclusion. Now, as I've heard the panelists, again, I congratulate the two of you because you both gave some very insightful information that I'm definitely going to take with me. Now, when I think about inclusion, I've always, even as a child, sometimes there is that old saying that common sense is the least common of all of the senses. Sometimes I believe that inclusion can be as simple as common sense. So first you have to value diversity, and once you value it, many companies have done a great job in hiring people from different backgrounds and different experiences and different ethnicities and races, et cetera, but then once we're all together, then what? Now we need to go to the next level. Now we need to think of, okay, now that we're all together, how can we make everyone feel that they are part of a team? And quite honestly, that is, these ideas, these values have to start at the top of an organization. The top of the house must value diversity, but then they must value inclusion. And they must, I believe in having policies in place because common sense is not always the prevailing factor in the room. So we need to first understand what, how does the saying go? If you don't know what you're looking for, chances are you'll end up somewhere else. So when we have policies in place, then we can get to the point of knowing where we're going, knowing what we're looking for. And like for example, when you're a child and you're invited to somebody's house, I remember sometimes feeling included, that they went out of their way to make sure that I was able to play with the other kids and that I can share with the other kids, and they made me feel included. Well, the same thing. Being a host takes hard work. Being a good host at work, it has to be a deliberate attempt. I'm looking for ways to find inclusion. I heard we were talking about language just a moment ago. I happen to be Hispanic. I was born in Cuba. I came to the United States 50 years ago. I remember coming over and not speaking a lick of English, and like everybody else, I learned. And while Spanish is my first language, and I love the Spanish language, one of my pet peeves in an organization, one way that I feel that I can make others feel inclusive is I try to speak English only because that is a common bond in most organizations. While we are all from different places, most of us do speak English. So if a group of people are just speaking Spanish in a room at the workplace and others walk by and you continue speaking in Spanish, that can really, others might feel, I've even heard people think that you're speaking about them, or at a very minimum, how can others feel included if they have no idea what you're saying? So my pet peeve and what I have always practiced is I love the Spanish language, and if I'm speaking one-on-one, but if a non-Hispanic, a non-Spanish speaking person walks into the room, I very naturally turn the conversation over to English. And I know I've said a mouthful, so I'm going to stop here. I don't want to take up too much time. But once again, I do believe that both diversity and inclusion has to be a deliberate attempt by an organization. So if you have any questions, I'd be happy to entertain them.
I want to say thank you to each of the panelists. You each shared some amazing perspectives. One of the questions I want to throw out to you is some of the conversation and controversy around the elimination, or some companies that are looking at eliminating affinity groups. And one of the questions I have for you around some of that is that, do you think affinity groups have taken such a strong hold because employees didn't feel heard and it was a way that they felt heard? And the second thing is, with focusing on inclusion, does that allow even those in the majority to feel included in that dance party or team? I guess if you could take that on, if any of you would like to talk about that a little bit.
Yeah, this is Tony. I'll take that. You know, in my previous employer at Chubb and Son, we had 20 some odd affinity groups, and I would argue that they were an important aspect of our culture, an important aspect of our diversity and inclusion platform. I think the challenge is, and I made this remark in my comments, I think the challenge is that what you don't want to do is have affinity groups actually reproduce a lack of inclusion to whoever the majority community is. And so what we tried to do in the last couple of years that I was there is to make sure that we had, whether it was in our LGBT community, we had straight allies that were big members of that communities, not only to be sponsors, but also to be active participants. We found that by including the majority in all development actions or all meetings, allowed for a more thoughtful discussion in driving that agenda. So I think that they're actually a very positive thing for organizations, but just like anything else, I think you have to think about their purpose, what they really are trying to accomplish within the organization, and how they fit within the larger fabric of the culture.
Oginga or John, do you want to share your inputs?
Well, I definitely agree. We are definitely not in a position, or have we ever been in a position, to eliminate any affinity groups. I think that there should be. I mean, I see nothing wrong with an affinity group, again, in that if for example, in University of Miami, I'll use that as an example. It's not my organization, but I have heard there are students that do come from different countries, and I've even heard, and although it's difficult to understand, that some people don't want to fit in. Some people don't even want to be part of a group, and others actually feel for example, if you do try to include them, or if you may try to speak to bring them into a group, they feel like they're being signaled out. I've heard that recently. So I think it's also free are the children of God. I've heard that saying. I think that I'm a strong believer that people should be free to choose to become members of groups, and if that makes you feel. But at the same time, I think that sometimes, instead of saying no, you can't do this, or which might lead someone to even go to another extreme when you're trying to limit actions, I think instead we should look for ways to promote inclusiveness of the whole, to find ways to, whether it's in work groups or team building exercises and other ongoing events, to bring people together. And like I said before, I believe training is essential, and not just e-training, but bring people into a room. So like we could get to the place, or to the point where we allow others to tell their story. So that's just my perspective. It's not something we've had to deal with here about eliminating any affinity groups, but I can see if it's going to make you just feel comfortable, while at the same time finding other ways to actually make you feel part of the whole. I think that's all I can think of right now.
Yes, and I totally agree with with John and with Tony and what they're saying with that. But one big thing that I like to point out to my clients and when we're teaching different things as far as that is that no matter what our backgrounds are and what we are, basically we all want the same thing. I can teach a class in Florida or in Wisconsin or in Washington State, and people basically want the same thing. And so your employees, if we can speak to our employees' aspirations of what it is that they want and be goal-based in those things, then that brings people together as well too, as well as affinity groups. You definitely want to be able to recognize, but I think that inclusion really has to do with people being focused on the aspirations and the things it is that they want, if that makes sense.
I want to bring up a question that Eric presented. He typed in, but I just want to throw it out so the rest of the group can hear. And then Tony answered, but I'd like you to share it so that we have it on the call. Much of the work revolves around diverse personality and communication styles. It is my experience that companies tend to define diversity primarily in terms of ethnicity and gender, things that can be more easily quantified for reporting numbers to parent companies and shareholders. While ethnicity and gender are certainly important pieces of the puzzle, what are the panelists' thoughts around how we might expand the definition of diversity in the workplace? Tony, do you want to start since you answered that one?
Yeah, I can't remember what I wrote, but I'll give it a shot. Look, I think this is from my perspective and my experience, this is primarily a U.S.-based problem. We like to measure things. We like to put numbers on things and then, frankly, reward ourselves by saying that we've checked a box and so we can move on. I think from my perspective, it goes back to some of my earlier comments about really focusing on inclusion and really talking with your employees about how they define inclusion and diversity. And again, making sure that you have, however you define it, the majority communities also involved in that conversation. I think it goes back to what Mr. Carr said, right, which is that we all want the same thing, and it is a matter of being inclusive. It is a matter of asking everybody to be part of the solution. And I think while it's important to track numbers, I think we're fooling ourselves if we think that just because we have a certain number of people in the pipeline of a certain demographic that somehow we've actually moved the needle on this conversation. I think it's an important first step. But it's certainly not the end story.
The thought that comes to my mind is if we put, let's say, 50 people in a room of the same ethnicity, race, and gender, even then, we were talking about expanding the definition of diversity. Well, even then, you will have diversity. There will be diversity of thought, but chances are you're going to get into what we call groupthink. And when you end up with groupthink, even with what little diversity there may be in that room, you more than likely you will make some gross interpretations of the world around us. I work for government, but I know that if you happen to work, or even in government, we can't get this wrong because we have to do marketing and we have to. If you only have one group representing an idea, chances are you're going to miss a lot of truth about the world around us. So that's why diversity must be expanded way beyond ethnicity and gender. And like the example I said before, socioeconomics, the different experiences that we all have lead us to different ways of looking at the world around us and the different ways of solving a problem. So you want to have people on a team that have diversity so that you can see all the angles and or as many angles as you can so that you'll get it right.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I think that it's pretty clear that people in general are uncomfortable with what it is that they do not know. And so what we must do is be able to find ways for us to be able to know ourselves better and to be able to know each other better, and not in a really hokey kind of forced way, but really by being able to say and look at and get participation from your people at levels, because people will stay at a job at a place where they are happy and they feel like that they're being listened to. We like to look for what we like to call core employees. A core employee is defined as an employee who's been with you for 2 or more years. Once someone's been with you for 2 or more years, you pretty much know what to expect from them. They pretty much know what to expect from you. It costs about 3 times the core employee salary to replace that core employee with another core employee. And that's because after they leave, we have to do overtime, the hiring process, all the different things like that. So if we can create more core employees in our organization, then our organizations can be greater and be better as well too.
How do you resolve the political disparage within the workplace brought on by our current political environment when we know that certain political views may be based on fear of minorities and on division rather than inclusion?
I can take that. I mean, honestly, the thing is that it goes back to our aspirations and what it is that we want to actually achieve. First of all, if we were going to go by the letter of the law as it relates in our workplaces, we wouldn't have necessarily those types of discussions that would go on. But we have to be honest with ourselves and know that these things are going to happen within our workplace. And it's never about looking backwards. It's always about looking forwards. It's about concentrating on what it is that we can do to bring our people together, because the reason why most of the time they don't feel like that they're uncomfortable with whatever background or whatever different thing as far as that is in general because they don't know and they haven't been exposed to people. We are more in silos in our life than ever, because you can get on Facebook and think that that's your entire world. Your 500 friends are your world, but all you're seeing is what it is that is around you. And so we're in silos, and so we have to break those silos down. HR is one of those things we have to use in order to break those silos down and to be able to realize how we can collaborate and be able to do that together.
10 or 20, do you have anything you want to add?
No, I think that was perfectly said.
The next question that's come in: what ways do you recommend convincing majority communities to find importance or value in diversity?
Well, I guess I can take that question. A moment ago, I used the example of getting people to see through exercises scotomas, which is a blind spot. We all have scotomas. We're all born with scotomas, and I've always said, I hope that in life, I will always find someone generous enough to take me by the hand and help me see the truth. There may be a truth that I'm missing. I think that we need to find ways to have group meetings and community meetings and events where we can get people talking, but we need to get people, and I believe for me, it's been one of the most rewarding experiences to just get people to the point where they can see, and sometimes through fun exercises. I think we all remember the exercise of a picture that shows a woman, and you start asking questions. Some people see a young woman, some people see an old woman. You all remember that? So through an exercise like that, I've been in classroom settings where people are just they really have a difficult time once they lock onto an idea. It's called, the harder you lock onto a concept or an idea, the harder it is for you to you lock other concepts and ideas, which could be the truth. You lock them out. So I think that we need to be able to bring such experiences to people in a community, because first you have to, if I have to move you from that place where you are, if you've locked on to stereotypes and ideas for so long, as far as you're concerned, that is your truth. So, and the only way that we can move from one place to the other is by exposing ourselves to conversations, and that's been my experience.
I definitely agree with that.
I think John said it really well. My only additive comment would be, I think 2 things. One is that I think there are lots of folks that sit in the majority that want to participate and do something, but they don't know the right way to go about it. So I think one of the purposes that an HR organization serves is to facilitate that interplay and that interaction and create that construct for people to be able to come to the table. And frankly, I think if there are people in the majority that aren't convinced that this is the right answer, I would just wait a few years because they won't be in the majority for much longer.
Yeah, I totally agree with that.
One last thing I wanted to share was, if you have not seen Accenture's inclusion video, I would recommend you YouTube it. It was pretty powerful. It gave me goosebumps and brought tears to my eyes because it makes you really think. And I think it's a really good example of listening to your employees and sharing what challenges we each face. And sometimes, kind of like what John said, you don't know what you don't know. And it's important to have that in your face and have those conversations to learn more. Thank you again for attending today, and save the date for our next event, which is October 4th for Data and Analytics. We're going to be learning about how companies are using data, what data they're using, and how they're painting a picture of how learning and development is impacting the organization. And thanks again for joining us, and thank you, Wendy, for being my voice through part of today's program. Thank you, everyone.